Let's welcome to the stage the candidates for San Jose City Council District 8. This seat, which covers Evergreen and East San Jose, is currently held by Councilmember Sylvia Arenas, who is being challenged by rival Jim Zito. So the rules are the same. You're each going to get a minute to do an opening statement. After that, I'll move right into questions where you'll each get a minute to answer those questions. When you see the stop sign go up, then try to wrap up what you're saying and we'll move on. So I'll start with you, Sylvia.
Wonderful. So I'm really proud to be serving our city at this moment in time when we have so many national issues that we have to fight for, right, and against. Born and raised in San Jose, I've been living in District 8 for the last 18 years with my husband and my 2 children who are still school-aged. And it's really because of them, families like mine, families like yours, that I'm seeking re-election. And what it really comes down to is making sure that our neighborhoods that are at the center of everything that I do, because really they're the building blocks of our society. When I first started, we had a decimation of our essential services, especially our police department. So we've had to work really hard to make sure that our streets are safe, that our neighborhoods are safe. And so we've doubled neighborhood associations in my district. We've, I think, by 20% increased police officers. So I'm really proud of the work that we've done so far.
Mm-hmm. Jim.
Good evening. I'm Jim Zito, and I am running for the San Jose City Council District 8. And as a 30-year Evergreen resident, I have been an effective leader in East San Jose and Evergreen. And 20 years leadership includes 8 years on the City Planning Commission, 10 years on the Evergreen School Board, 13 years on the D8 Community Roundtable, and I was a founding member and first president, 4 years on the General Plan Task Force, and all the update committees. And my priorities, and the reason why I sought to run, is because I want to ensure that we have strong and safe neighborhoods, that we reduce traffic congestion, that we provide adequate housing and affordable housing, and also to deal with the homeless issue, which is a real tragedy, and ensure that San Jose stays fiscally sustainable. So to all San Jose residents, I will say I'll be fiscally responsible, independent, and I will stand up to both special interests and to divisiveness.
Great. Jim, we're going to go right into questions, and I'm going to start with you. You
Sure.
mentioned homelessness. That's where we're going to start. It has increased by 42% in San Jose over the last 2 years, despite voters approving a $950 million bond measure for affordable housing. So my question is, why aren't we making a dent in the problem, and what new solutions do we need to try?
Well, I think part of the reason why we're not making a dent is we haven't really done the homework and studied what are the causes of the homelessness, right? We know that there are mental health issues. We know that there's just people who are down on their luck and maybe missed a paycheck because of being laid off or be reorganized. It could be because of drug abuse. We need to really separate out which people are suffering from which of the issues. It is not a one-size-fits-all for the solution. I think that we need to also work more cooperatively with the state, county, and federal agencies. There's a lot of money being poured into this problem, and I think we really need to do a more effective use of those funds and working together to come up with best solutions, and also use best practices from other cities.
The question again is, why aren't we making a dent? And what new solutions do we need to try?
Okay. Thank you for the question. I'm going to start when I was serving as a school board member in Evergreen School Board. I saw the exodus of our families, of our children. In our first 2 years, we lost about 1,000 kids. And so that means that those families have left the area. So it's not just an issue of housing, of having affordable housing. For sure, we are making some progress there. But the issues are multi-layered, right? It's an issue of high cost of living and stagnant salaries. It's an issue of not having a regional approach. We can't build our way out of this, and it can't be left to San Jose to do. We really have to rely on our our cities, our neighboring cities, to step up to the plate and do the same thing that we're doing, right, and investing. Just this week, we passed a affordable housing project. It's the Quetzal Gardens, and that's 71 units, new units for that have, I think, up to 3 rooms. So it means that they're accommodating families, and that's really who's at danger and at the center of all this. So we have to make sure we organize.
Great. I'll stick with you. How would you deal with so-called NIMBYs who refuse to allow affordable housing in District 8?
I'm sorry, it's for me?
Yes, we'll stay with you.
Repeat the question.
How would you deal with NIMBYs who refuse to allow affordable housing in District 8?
We do have an underlying restraint on District 8, and it's the East Hills Evergreen Development Policy, and so we're not meant to grow. Our area is not meant to grow. We've seen developers try to grow our area, even illegal development, and so I fought that with our community. We did that together. We fought against special interest in illegal development. And so it's not about affordable housing in District 8. It's about any type of development. It's very restricted by our development policy, and so we have, I think, one unit or one building that is affordable housing that's near our villages, and it's our senior housing. But the truth is that District 8, if we build, it's more expensive because the city infrastructure costs are too expensive for us to keep up, and that would just fall back on the residents and our taxpayers. So we have to take a look at where it's smart to do that, and that means building high in the downtown areas.
Okay. And Jim?
So your question was about NIMBYs, and I was on the Planning Commission for 8 years. And let me tell you, people would come before the Planning Commission on a regular basis, and there was a lot of opposition to certain types of development. The key that I found with that experience is communication and a lot of, groundwork ahead of time. Work with the community ahead of time, have the community understand what's happening. For instance, now we're in the 2040 Vision Update. I'm on that committee. I was on the prior 4 years, and I was on the original. And I think that when people understand what's going to be expected, like the urban villages, then they can start to become used to what's going on. Having that, run up so people understand and it's not a surprise, and also working with the community and consistently getting their stakeholder input is going to be key to minimizing and mitigating NIMBY issues.
Great. And can we just stick with you for this
Sure.
question? The city is looking for new ways to generate money for affordable housing, and the City Council approved a March 2020 ballot measure to tax voters with a real property transfer tax for affordable housing. And I'm just curious, will you be voting yes or no on this measure, and why?
I was disappointed with that vote by the City Council, and the reason why is this. I think the premise is good, and I am all about trying to provide solutions for affordable housing and for the homeless. However, putting a general tax on the ballot with no guarantee that it can be used for the purpose intended, maybe it can start that way, but future councils can choose to change that. The second thing is it's a forever tax. And having a forever tax to me and not having the ability to go back and see the effectivity of whether or not that it was a good tax, the efficacy, and also to be able to adjust it, okay? And the third thing is where that flaw is. In Evergreen, $2 million probably affects, I don't know for sure, but probably 30% of commercial and residential properties. So I think that it should have been more assurances, how should I say, and making sure that maybe there's a sunset to it.
Sylvia?
Thank you for the question. I obviously supported it. I voted on it this week, and I'm very proud of doing that. One, because it's not really on our residents. I was very nervous about another tax on our residents, but this tax really is going to impact 2%. Maybe 3% of the properties in San Jose. And those properties are not in Evergreen. They're just not. There's very few of them, right? And so this is my the reason that I am able to support it. One, it's general, and two, the voters say they are supportive of it, and really it has to be on the based on the voters. I can support it all I want, but if the voters don't have the appetite for another tax, they'll let us know at the ballot, right? But right now, I think it's a matter of putting together all of our efforts, because it can't be just on production, it has to be on protection and preservation, but this is definitely one viable option.
Could I rebut that, please?
Sure, we'll give you 30 seconds.
Okay, this should be quick. I'm just thinking of the Silver Creek Country Club and the Villages. There are a lot of properties in those two places, the Meadowlands, that are easily at $2 million. And so that's where I'm really concerned. Now, I do believe that overall in San Jose, it's probably a much lesser percentage, but for our district, it's going to impact us more than most.
Okay.
Can I do a rebuttal?
We'll do one more rebut for 30
Okay.
seconds.
So we have a colleague, Pam Foley, and she's a realtor. And so this is what she does before she became a council member. And she brought an average. And for Evergreen, it was about 1.3 was the average sales of homes. And there were very, very few in Silver Creek and very, very few in the Villages that went up to $2 million. So it's not very common. We do have a lot of mansions, but our district wouldn't really be the one that is most impacted. Actually, it would be District 1 near Cupertino.
Okay, so let's move on to another tax, potential tax. Do you support a new commercial linkage fee in San Jose to pay for affordable homes? Why or why not? Can we start with you, Sylvia?
Sure. Typically, we asked new development, like Google, who's coming into San Jose, to comply with the 20% affordable housing. And they're going beyond that 20%. They're going to 25%. They're doing their part, right? But it doesn't mean that everybody else who's building is going beyond that limit. Of what we're asking for. And so I think a commercial linkage fee is something that most of my colleagues are supporting, that I support. It's important that when one company, it's not on the shoulders of just one company, but that everybody who's getting the benefits of the redevelopment, if you will, of the downtown area, everybody has to pay into play, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that question. So since 2002, when I started on the Planning Commission, the biggest issue that we ran up against was the job housing imbalance. And I believe that the problem is that locating businesses in San Jose is something that we really need to do to reverse that commute, to minimize that ratio, or actually to optimize that ratio so we have more jobs and less housing, so that the services isn't such a big portion of our costs. I'm concerned that a linkage fee on all companies is going to cause companies to say, we don't really want to locate in San Jose. We have to really be careful of being, how can I say, so obstructive or so put up so many barriers that we actually scare away businesses and commercial. So that's a concern.
Can I do a rebuttal on that?
Sure, we'll do 30 seconds.
So a commercial linkage, an effective commercial linkage fee means that we take a look at what the cost of development plus what is really, what can afford to have a development. And the areas right now that can actually develop are the west side, downtown, and north San Jose. And so those areas would have a more significant commercial linkage fee than areas like Evergreen, or areas that, typically development is not viable or feasible. And so one of the things that we're doing in the city is making sure we tailor to that.
Great. Let's move on to basically division on the city council. We're seeing our current national political landscape perhaps trickling down to our local politics, and we're seeing a lot of 6-5 split votes without much room for compromise on that. Mm-hmm. So how will you bridge the so-called business versus labor divide on the council and work with colleagues with whom you strongly disagree with? And Sylvia, I think you started the last one, so we'll start with Jim on this one.
Thank you for that question. People who know me know that I always work across the aisle. I always work together. To me, there are no political divides, right? Divisiveness is a cancer. It really is. It prevents good functioning groups to come up with solutions. Okay. When I was on the Planning Commission, I've always worked with my colleagues, and even though I might be more conservative and might be more insistent on certain aspects, we would work together and we would try to come up with a compromise that was in the best interest of the community in general. Right? The way I would work is I'm independent as far as my thoughts are concerned. Right? I dig deep and I try to find out what the consequences are of all of our decisions, and then to provide that information. And I think an informed decision is what helps people work together.
Thank you. I'm currently serving and facing this dynamic. It's very unsettling to have your colleagues who typically, we, all of us, I think, have the same concerns for our community: housing, public safety, transportation. It's the way we go about it, right? That we have sometimes a difference of opinions, but I think those differences bring richness into the discussion, and I think that needs to be leadership that is open to that, that's open to making sure that there's compromises and that we find a common ground, because there's value to both sides. I typically, and I'll tell you, this is the two most divisive votes have been one around the equity during the budget season, and the second is the high-rise development incentive fee. And for both of those, the reasons, and I just want to share is really quickly, is equity is absolutely important. We need to make sure that our systems reflect that. And second, the high-rise development didn't include workforce standards, so I couldn't support it.
Great. Let's switch gears a little bit to electricity, an issue that is going to be plaguing us for the next decade, because following years of disastrous fires and planned power outages, Mayor Sam Liccardo has called for a customer-owned utility in San Jose. And I'd like to know if you support that proposal and why or why not. Can we start with you?
Sure, absolutely. Our residents are really just taking some damage, if you will, from the lack of infrastructure investment from PG&E. And we shouldn't have to do that because we've been paying our fees. We pay into PG&E, and so we should be benefiting from a safe infrastructure. So I do agree with the mayor in a consumer-owned utility company. I don't know that it's going to happen rather quickly, but I think we should study it and figure out what are the benefits. We already have a clean energy department, so it's not a stretch to figure out how to have a consumer-based public utility.
Right?
Thank you. Yes, I think in concept to bring in the public utility might be attractive. But I really always hesitate when government takes over certain, how can I say, utilities. Take, for instance, water, right? We don't have as much control over the pricing of the water, and the bills that get to the residents. However, we are in Silicon Valley, and there's some amazing technology out there, and I think that microgrids are really a way that we can go ahead and not necessarily have it owned by the by the municipality, but allow customers to take part in ownership, and I mean true customer ownership. Okay, with microgrids, you have the ability to have groups, maybe schools, maybe large areas that have solar panels, be a center and distribution hub for power in their neighborhoods or in their communities. And I really believe that that's something that we should start to look at as a solution and work with private industry, have a public-private partnership to work toward that goal.
Great. One of the biggest topics in San Jose right now is around the downtown, which we've talked about a bit. So specifically what's happening around the Google development, around what Jay Paul and others are doing, Gary Delabau in the downtown. And my question is, there's undoubtedly going to be ripple effects across the city from these. So how can we ensure the impact from this wave of development is positive across the city? Can we start with you, Jim?
Sure. So we're talking about a development of residential or commercial or combination?
So what's happening in downtown is a large combination between the Google development,
Okay.
but then of course we've got a lot of commercial development happening in the city's core between what J. Paul is doing at
Right.
City View Plaza and Park.
So you're talking about the big picture.
Yep.
Okay.
All
so,
of the development coming at once.
Okay. So I do believe the downtown is the proper place for most development. I believe most downtowns are built for that purpose. The transit infrastructure, the overall services infrastructure, and the more density that you have downtown, the more you're able to economize, right? Because you'll be able to raise that tax base without having an excessive amount of service cost, right? So I actually believe that as long as you manage that, and we have experts in San Jose and in the surrounding area. We probably would need to work with the county and other surrounding cities because it's going to not just impact San Jose, but the whole region. So from that perspective, I think that working together cooperatively and to really look at what the impacts are, to really do some smart development, smart planning. I love the fact that we're in our next round of the 2040 update, and we can start looking at where those urban villages are going to be, where the intensification should be, and to maybe relax the height limitations and things like that.
Great.
I think it's an exciting time for San Jose. We're growing, we really are. And I remember going to the St. Joseph's Cathedral with my parents when I was a kid, and downtown looks nothing like when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s. And I think it's a good progress, right? I think we have to make sure that there's public value in a lot of the development that the city of San Jose is involved in. And with that, we have to make sure that there's workforce standards involved. Because when you grow, you're going to need the service industry. And the service industry, you have to make sure that there's affordable housing. You have to make sure that that you take into account that growth into our city and not just accommodate high-end earners. And so I think that's one of the issues that we are facing now is that, this housing crisis is also an income crisis. And we haven't really advocated for our service industry to grow at the same time our high-end tech industry is growing. So unless we have other alternatives.
Great. So we're gonna do our final question here, and this one is, I want to know the biggest difference between you and your opponent. I'll start with you, Sylvia.
Sure. Jim and I both served on the Evergreen School District. I have 23 years of public service. I'm a true public servant, and I've been doing this service with our families in different capacities. And so I look at policies and I look at the public value of it. And what is our neighborhood? What is our families? What is a single mom with 3 kids? What are they going to gain from the decision that's in front of me? And so I really take a look at a very granular level, the impact that our policies have on our families and our communities. And so part of I think the difference is that we may have real similar values, but the way we go about achieving our values and achieving our policies is the biggest difference. I know that we have politically 2 different views. You're a Republican, I'm a Democrat. But that shouldn't divide us, right? We have both the same very similar concerns about our communities. The second biggest difference is that I've been already doing this work, and I think very successfully.
Thank you for that question. Yes, I am a fiscal conservative and a social moderate. I'm not a progressive. I have real depth in all that I've done. I've been on the school board for 10 years. Okay, I'm in my 3rd term. I was on the planning commission for 2 full terms, even though I was asked while I was on the planning commission, hey, will you run for city council? And I said, no, I haven't done my work. I want to finish out my terms, okay? My depth of experience, my analysis of the issues, okay? The fact that I really do reach out and I try to find not just what the answer to the problem is, but what are the unintended consequences down the line, right? I reach out and try to get as much input and do my homework because an informed decision is the best kind of decision. I demand for data, and when I was on school board, before that, had people come up to me and say, oh, they were 15 minutes long. When I'm on the school board, they're never 15 minutes long because I ask the kinds of questions. Same thing with the Planning Commission. I'm thorough, I reach out, and I work with people. And I think, not saying necessarily that Sylvia doesn't, but that's something that is a trademark. I truly walk the walk.
Great. Well, I think that pretty much wraps up our questions for tonight. So I want to thank both of you for joining us. I want to thank everybody from our audience in-house, as well as people who might be viewing this online, for tuning in. Remember to join us tomorrow for our second night of candidate forums. That's going to be featuring races for San Jose City Council Districts 2, 4, 6, and 10. And if you appreciate San Jose Spotlight's work to keep the community informed, please support our nonprofit newsroom by becoming a sustainable member with a donation as little as $5 a month. You can learn more at sanjosespotlight.com. Thanks again, and good night.
Sylvia, thank you.
Thank you, Janice.
Thank you for your service.
Hi, my name is Janice Bitters. I'm the senior reporter for San Jose Spotlight. Welcome to the first of our two-night election 2020 candidate forums. Tonight you're going to hear from candidates running for Senate District 15, Assembly District 25, Santa Clara County Supervisor District 3, as well as San Jose City Council District 8. Thank you, CreaTV, for hosting our San Jose, in your San Jose studio, and for recording tonight's forum. We want to thank our audience for attending tonight's forum, and we want to ask that you all refrain from any disruptions while CreaTV is recording this video. We ask our audience basically not to clap, boo, disrupt the candidates while they're responding to the questions or to the moderator, and we will take questions from the audience if time permits. The forum will be aired on Bay Voice TV on cable channel 27. And an article and video recording of the forum will be available on our website, sanjosespotlight.com. Tonight's ground rules is that each candidate is going to get 1 minute for an opening statement, followed by 1 minute to respond to each question. All candidates will be asked the same questions, and will be allowed a 30-second rebuttal at the moderator's discretion. There will be no closing statements. Fernanda Jimenez is going to keep track of time for us tonight. Now, let's get started with the Senate District 15, which covers San Jose, Los Gatos, Saratoga, Campbell, Cupertino, Monte Sereno, and is being vacated by termed-out Senator Jim Bell. So we'll go ahead and start with your guys' opening statements. You get 1 minute. Can we start with you, Mr. Cortese?
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for hosting this forum. I'm excited to be here, and I'm very excited to be running for state senate and looking forward to getting to Sacramento to work on many of the same issues that we have led on here in Santa Clara County, that our county has been innovative around, and I see the opportunity to do that at the state senate. I've served here at the County Board of Supervisors for 10 years. I've served on the San Jose City Council, including 2 years as vice mayor for 8 years before that. And I served as a school trustee here in Santa Clara County for 8 years prior to that. I'm a lifelong resident of the area with a business background. But the issues that we've been working on here in Santa Clara County, the $950 million housing bond, the campaign for that, which I co-chaired, which has now produced 22 projects that are being financed by the county, and many, many more to go to house our homeless, justice reform, climate issues, open space issues. These are all things we hope to talk about today and in the future.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Hi, I'm Councilmember Johnny Camus. I'm a proud immigrant and living the American dream. I came here when I was 8 years old, had to learn a new language, and with my family, we've actually all succeeded, built my own business here, right here in San Jose, and sold it because I was very concerned about the financial situation of our city. I've been, since 2013, I've been the fiscal, the voice of fiscal responsibility and accountability at the City Hall, and I've worked to smooth out a lot of the programs and make sure that we are getting the best value for our dollars. I think that people in our Senate district don't think that we're getting the best value for our tax dollars. This is why I've decided to throw my hat in the race. I want to work to make sure that our California state government is accountable and is performing on the promises that they have promised our public. And I'm also running as an independent because I don't want to work for a political party. I want to work for the citizens. I want to work on issues.
Hi, I'm Ann Ravel. Thank you very much, Spotlight, for sponsoring this. I'm so glad to be here. I have spent my career as a public servant, and what that means is I have done projects, I've done new programs, and I've done litigation on behalf of the people of this county, of the state, and in the federal government as well. And because of all the creative programs I did in Santa Clara County, President Obama appointed me to the Justice Department, where I continued the work that I have done on behalf of the people. I'm not a politician. I want to help the people of this county. And when I came back from DC, it was clear to me that the people who are running this county and the state are not making a life for people in this state that they deserve. And that's why so many people are saying they want to leave, because of the traffic, the housing problems, transportation issues, and I want to fix that.
Hello, my name is Nora Campos, and I'm running for State Senate District 15. And I'm running because I have championed issues within the district that has raised me my entire life. And I hope to continue doing that. When I was in the Assembly, I was able to work on issues that affected us here back home, whether it was creating affordable housing, housing for homeless, making sure that we continue to move forward and create an educational system that gives the opportunity for all of our children to have a first-class education, transportation, and making sure that we are creating and housing individuals here so that they can work, play, and live here in Silicon Valley. This is a great opportunity for us to continue to move California forward, and I know that Silicon Valley is at the forefront of that. So it's going to take bold leadership, and I know that as I was in the Assembly, I had the opportunity to be in leadership, and I hope to continue to be able to serve you once again. Thank you.
My name is Tim Gildersleeve. I'm running for Senate District 15 in California. I have never held an elected office before. This is my fourth run for office. What motivates me is I'm a follower of Jesus Christ, and it is second commandment of loving one's neighbor as oneself that gets me out to run for office. I take that very seriously in my life. I volunteer, and serving people is of the highest lifestyle that I believe one can live. And this position would allow me to expand on that philosophy of serving people. My emphasis on issues that I'd like to see: universal health care, tuition-free education, housing recognized as a human right. I'm pro-union, and I want to represent the poor, elderly, and disabled, protect them against huge budget cuts and protect the most vulnerable. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all for that. I'm going to jump right into the questions because we are going to basically do a lightning round. So we've got 1 minute per question, and if needed, we'll do 30 seconds for a rebuttal. I'm going to start on the topic of homelessness with you, Mr. Cortese. There's little doubt that the homeless crisis across California is getting worse, with double-digit spikes in San Jose and Santa Clara County. And so how can the state compel cities to approve more low-income housing, and how should those who don't comply be punished?
Well, the state of California needs to create incentives for affordable housing and for extremely low-income housing, like we've done here in Santa Clara County. That's why I often say here in the county, we've been leading, not following. And I think the state's starting to catch up to us, but I'm eager to get to Sacramento to try to create the same kind of bucket of money that we did here with the $950 million housing bond. The way you end homelessness is to house people and to provide the wraparound services, the mental health services, the behavioral health services that they need on a permanent basis. And thank God we've done the work that we've done here, not only with the general homeless population, but with the program that Mayor Liccardo and I started called the All the Way Home campaign, which has housed over 1,600 veterans in the last 3 years, by using every tool that we have to try to make that happen. Nobody should be living outside on an evening like this in the middle of winter when it's cold, when the weather is wet, and suffering from lack of shelter.
Great.
Well, I think that homelessness has more to do with people's conditions than necessarily finding housing. I think housing is a very important topic here, but the people who are homeless have a lot of them, most of them have either mental illness or drug addiction issues. And the state and the county have largely ignored these topics. I think much more needs to be done on conservatorship programs like Laura's Law that exist throughout the state except for Santa Clara County. We need to make that law statewide and allow for people to have temporary conservatorships and mandate drug rehabilitation programs for people who have drug addiction issues and are not making good decisions for themselves, especially those returning from prison populations, which we've had thousands released from prison populations. Without the services like finding new homes and finding jobs for them, I think the state has a responsibility to do just that.
Homelessness is a pretty varied issue, and it depends much on some who are mentally ill and some who are not. Some may be just drug addicted. So the ways of dealing with that is different. But as you say, what is really significant is housing, and housing for all people, no matter their income level, and particularly homeless. And what they need to have is supportive housing where they're able to live safely. And the state does have an obligation, and I believe one way to finance the land would be for there to be like a redevelopment agency solely for housing, as there used to be, to provide more financing to do this. And also the counties, the cities, everyone that has excess land, particularly public land, should be utilized for housing. And notably, the county has refused to do that for the homeless.
First of all, thank you for the question. I think this is an issue that's at the top of every voter and resident here in Silicon Valley. When I was in the Assembly, I took the initiative to partner with the City of San Jose, and we were able to create AB 2176, which allowed the city to create a path to build tiny homes to house our unhoused individuals that live here, which are homeless. And the great thing about that bill is that we are actually housing individuals right now. They're moving in, they're built, so individuals with the rain coming down and families will actually be able to have a dry winter right now. But it's not enough. As they're building the permanent housing, at least individuals right now, or unhoused individuals, will actually be able to bear the winter with a roof over their head, where families and children will be able to be in a safe place. That's what Silicon Valley is about, and that's the leadership that I'll continue to bring to Silicon Valley.
Mm-hmm.
All right. First of all, as I stated in my opening statement, I believe housing is a human right. Everybody should be housed. But as has been mentioned already, we have two aspects of homelessness that deter people from getting housed. That's mental illness and substance abuse. Those, I believe, have to immediately get into transitional housing with social services assistance. As for those that are the working poor that are working and our families are out in the street, we need to emphasize getting them into housing right away. I also was for Proposition 10, which would have returned the power to the local authorities in regards to rent control. It was not about rent control, it was about returning the power to local authorities to decide whether we should do that or not. I was in favor of that, even though I was in the minority, and I'm still in favor of some forms of rent control, but not as a permanent solution.
Great. And so the state recently passed SB 35. It went into effect last year, I believe, and it is to push forward housing development. But some say that these are necessary laws, while others say that they are an overreach by the state. So what is your philosophy on balancing state versus local control to tackle the housing crisis? And I'll start with you.
Well, there has to be a balance between state and local control, and of course there is now, and we need to continue to protect that as much as possible. But the reality is in this region, the Bay Area region, there's 9 counties and 101 cities that each put forward general plans and housing plans each year which indicate how much affordable housing they're going to build, how much moderate income housing they're going to build. And there's an expectation for those planners who are trying to plan the total housing needs of the Bay Area and the transportation needs that these homes are actually going to get built. So I think it's right and it's fair for the state to come along and say, if you say you're going to build it, we are going to pass laws to make that an expedited event. We want it to happen now. If you have general plan and zoning conditions that allow housing, we want to see that housing go forward. So I think you're going to see more incentives from the state. And I support that.
Great.
Well, as a sitting council member, I've seen the effects of some of the bills that have been passing through the state legislature, and some of them are, overarching, and some of them are overriding some of the local laws, and so I think it's actually created a lot of confusion in our building and planning department, something that we were trying to alleviate, to streamline the building and planning department. I think it's actually confusing the matters much more. But in general, I think the state has been forced to do this because of a failure of local leadership, and failure in much of the city and the counties as well, to find lands and develop it quickly. And I think more needs to be done on that. And I'm looking for ways to reform CEQA requirements and some of the arduous things that have led to increased prices and increased time from the start from when they're approved until they're built. So there's a lot that more needs to be done on reforming laws that's slowing down the process.
There is no question that the provisions of SB 35 are good provisions, and that has required some local entities to provide housing when they should be doing so. So I agree with that completely. On the other hand, I think that most of the housing that is built needs to be tailored to the local situation. You can have requirements, but you cannot impose on certain communities a kind of a height mandate, except perhaps in certain transit-rich areas. But you cannot do that because every community is different, and there has to be a combination of local communities having input about the way it looks and the way it could be accomplished in terms of the need for housing. There's no doubt that the lack of housing has caused income inequality, and we have to provide it.
We know that housing is an issue that affects everyone in the state of California, and we know it's at the top of everyone's agenda. But in order for us to actually address this issue, we have to create policy that actually moves cities to be able to build the housing that needs to be built in their community. And as we think about this, SB 35 is taking one step closer to us reaching our goal. And will we reach our goal within the next year, within the next 3 years, or next 4 years? I'm hopeful, but it is important for each city and counties, if they're building housing, to meet those plans that they put forward when they create their general plan. And it is important for the state to also make sure that they're meeting their goals. That's what the state is responsible for. And if it's not happening locally, then it needs to happen at the state. And I hope that as we move forward, as I move forward in my leadership, that I can make that happen with a partnership with our cities.
I think I have to agree somewhat with Nora in that I personally would prefer local control. I don't like the idea of a one-size-fits-all policy with any type of policy. However, if the local entity is not getting the job done, and that's what's been happening in housing, then it has to go the state route. There has to be a little bit of, shall we call it some force or coercion, not a nice word, to encourage the local entities to build housing. I'm also concerned that many people, there are many that would say that they're concerned about housing and homelessness, but when it comes time to bring it into their neighborhood, they don't want it built there. I think that we have to be a little bit more, do much more outreach in the communities to bring those two viewpoints together, not wanting it and yet being concerned about housing and homelessness.
Great. California's redevelopment agencies were dissolved in 2011, which helped to close a funding gap in public schools, but it reduced the amount of money cities could put towards affordable housing. Of course, we've started to touch on this, but in your opinions, is there political will right now to bring redevelopment back?
I don't think that there's political will to bring redevelopment back. We've seen a couple of attempts to do that. Even Senator Bell's bill SB 5 this year was not signed into law, which would have created a housing finance agency at the state level, which would have at least replicated or mimicked the kind of money, the amount of investment that would have been available for local projects, for local subsidies. I think what you saw with the county under the leadership of the Board of Supervisors just a few years ago in 2016 was us looking around and saying the cities can no longer do this. We need to go to the voters on a countywide basis and raise $950 million so that we can start subsidizing and building projects and creating low-income housing. We do need something like that at the state level, and we need something like that at the regional level. Assembly Bill 1487 this year, Chew's bill, will allow at a regional level for us to create, again, a housing finance agency that begins to step in and fill that void that redevelopment left.
Well, I think the redevelopment, as Supervisor Cortese just mentioned, that I don't think the idea is working its way successfully through the halls of Sacramento. However, there are many ideas that have been floated around. There's so many new ways to tax the community. There's, in the city of San Jose, we actually have inclusionary housing fees and actually inclusionary housing built into any new development that's required now, or not, it didn't used to be required years ago. We have, impact fees that are being proposed. There's lots of new taxes being proposed, and I'm just afraid that all these taxes are going to actually exacerbate the housing problem rather than help it, because as long as we keep taxing, it'll make it harder and harder to live here, because in the end, the consumers pay the price. Mm-hmm.
Actually, redevelopment was about tax increment financing. It wasn't an additional tax on anybody. And the problem with redevelopment was, and I know this because I sued the city of San Jose that overreached on redevelopment, was that it was not overseen and it was being used to pay for city council members' salaries and other things. Housing is another issue. And I've actually had a conversation last week with the governor's office, and there might be interest in renewing Jim Bell's bill about redevelopment being focused solely on housing, because it's a way of financing housing that will not actually reintroduce additional taxes or fees on individuals, and instead it will provide for a consistent funding mechanism that makes sense, because we know that we need more housing and we need it now.
I think that there are some elements from redevelopment that can be useful in the toolbox when we create housing in Silicon Valley. And I believe that there are discussions, I think, in the halls in Sacramento. There are individuals putting together some ideas on how we bring back something that looks like redevelopment, but that's not redevelopment. Because at the end of the day, when redevelopment was in existence, the city of San Jose was able to build 10,000 homes within their plan that they had given. To make sure that we were building housing. And out of that, I was able to build 2,500 units in my district. And one of the things that we were able to do is build it on a transit corridor, and build it so that we were able to house individuals, whether they were teachers, bus drivers, people that worked in retail, so that they could afford to live here in Silicon Valley.
Okay, I actually think it was a bad idea for us to get rid of redevelopment in the state of California. Nevertheless, since we've gone that route, I don't like the idea of going back and trying to have to get it back into our system again. Now, a philosophy I've got is I believe that we should help each other, and I'm willing to spend the money, see taxation, see bond measures. So I am in favor. I don't have a problem with spending money, taxation, and bonds to help a lot of people, as long as it's watched over very carefully and it's not spent. There's no embezzlement or bad spending. So that's the route I think we should go, and it would be up to my voters to decide whether we want to spend more money with taxation and bonds or not.
One of the only issues that gets about as much attention as the housing crisis in the Bay Area is climate change. And so I would like to know, what's something new that you would push forward to tackle climate change if you were elected?
Well, climate change is something that I've worked on a lot in my career, especially the last few years. I've had the opportunity to lead on a national basis to create a county climate coalition with former Vice President Al Gore, which now has 29 member counties. We just added another one last week in Wisconsin. Los Angeles County came on board during the summer. I was just in San Francisco earlier this morning speaking to counties from all over the state, getting them on board, with the idea being that counties themselves and local governments need to pledge to be 100% renewable and then actually do it. Sometimes government can be early adopters. When you see a government going to 100% electricity versus fossil fuels, it leads the way. And then just recently in the county of Santa Clara, I proposed that we adopt REACH codes, which is a way to build carbon restoration and carbon capture right into your building codes. So we need to do that, and we need to educate our kids. That is a big issue and something that we can do more of every day of the week.
Sure. In the city of San Jose, we've been leaders on climate change. We've created a community choice energy program. We just finished purchasing 1,000 acres of land for creating wildlife habitat and ways to allow the earth to suck in some of the carbon that's being generated. As far as what's new, I have several proposals out there. One of them is to create a mower blower buyback for the gas, for the highly polluting gas-powered mower and blowers that are all over the state of California and pollute more than an 8-cylinder car, each one, creating a buyback program where they trade it in for an electrical one. And we can use that with existing dollars that are there to fight greenhouse gases. And also, we need to look at the way we store our garbage. It creates a lot of methane, and we need to handle it in much more scientific ways where we extract the methane before it gets into the ozone.
So we know that despite what California has done about climate change, there was a report last week, and there is more carbon in there than ever. So we have not done enough. And I do have several ideas as well. One of them would be to give money to subsidize refurbishing old buildings to make them electric. Another one would be for low-income people who have old cars to buy back the cars and subsidize electric vehicles for those individuals. And finally, I mean, it also seems to me that one way to have more electric and less carbon is to utilize more power from electricity, from water and wind and solar, and we don't have enough large-size batteries to do it, and we need to invest in technology so that we can make sure that there are larger ways of storing that electricity.
I think all of the issues tie in together. We've been talking about housing, but if we think about it, if we can get people out of their cars and using our public transportation, completing a system here in Silicon Valley and in California that actually gets individuals out of their car so that they're using public transportation. But if we're building more housing here in Silicon Valley, that means that individuals are not spending 2 to 3 to 4 hours on the road from Hollister, from Stockton, from Tracy, coming in to Silicon Valley for the jobs. So it is crucial for us to continue to put and invest in building housing here where individuals work. Getting people out of their cars and using public transportation or being able to house them here in Silicon Valley will add to reducing what we need to do for climate change. And when I was in Sacramento, we were at the lead of making sure that climate change was being addressed, and I hope to continue to be able to do that. Thank you.
Okay, I've been using this term environmental crisis rather than climate change. And the reason I call it an environmental crisis is because it isn't just the climate. We've also got fish disappearing, wildlife disappearing, we've got bees, we've got problems with our bees. So it's an overall environmental issue. The whole ecosystem is being affected. Now, in regards to addressing it, I am in favor of zero emissions vehicles. I think we need to move rapidly in that direction. An idea I have is for a recycling hotline, a statewide 24/7, 365 recycling hotline, so people could ask questions where they can get their things recycled rather than seeing them dumped on the streets or improperly recycled. So that's something I would like to see. And we need to take care of our water also. Water was considered the #1 issue a few years ago by California people.
Great. So this panel was scheduled to run from 6 o'clock until 6:30, and we've now hit our time. I want to thank all of you for coming and answering these questions, and I want to thank our audience for viewing, and looking forward to the election.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having
Thank
us.
you.
Great job.
That's
Yeah, great job. Great job.
Hi, and welcome back. Let's go ahead and welcome to the stage the candidates for Assembly District 25. This seat, which covers Fremont, Milpitas, Santa Clara, and North San Jose, is being vacated by Assemblyman Kansan Chu. And just to lay out the ground rules, you'll each have 1 minute to offer an opening statement. After that, we'll jump straight into questions. You'll get 1 minute each to answer the questions. We'll be keeping time over here, so just watch out for that. And there will be no closing statements. We're going to go ahead and start with Ann for your opening statement.
Thank you. My name is Ann Kepner, and I am running for Assembly District 25. I grew up in San Jose. I've lived the majority of my life in the Valley, and I've watched tremendous changes occur in the Valley. And after serving as a lawyer, work as a lawyer for the last 25 years, I've now served on the West Valley Mission Community College District Board and also volunteered in a variety of capacities in our community. Mostly in roles in my children's schools, for the YMCA and other community organizations. And I see a tremendous need for someone to enter Sacramento in this position and really bring to it bold, strong leadership so that we can make significant changes to improve the quality of life for residents of Assembly District 25. We need to address the housing issues, transportation issues, the access to health care, improve the support that our public school systems receive in the area, and I'm excited to serve.
Hi, my name is Alex Lee, and I'm running for Assembly District 25 because I've called the South Bay home my entire life. And I'm running because we are frustrated, our community is frustrated with the status quo. In the 5th wealthiest economy in the world, 1 in 5 Californians live in poverty. And at the same time, right here in my home county of Santa Clara, 1 in 5 residents pay more than 50% of their income just on housing. So it's clear, we have an unprecedented housing affordability crisis that we're suffering from. And what's also clear is that our community can no longer wait for incremental change or half measures anymore. So, as the only candidate here who has served in the State Assembly and the State Senate as a legislative policy advisor, I'm going to hit the ground running on day one to realize housing as a real human right. And tonight I'm excited to share more about how we can make California affordable for all, but you could also find out more at votealexlee.com. Thank you.
Looking for the red light.
The middle one.
Hi, I'm Jim Canova, and I've served on the Santa Clara Unified School District for 27 years. And additionally, I've also served on the Metro Ed Governing Board. That's the Silicon Valley Career Technical Education Board for 17 years. My priorities for serving in the Assembly, my first priority is to restore direct funding to career technical education in California. That's my highest priority. It's an important piece to the affordability issues that we face. Career tech really provides our students with the ability to make incredible incomes and be very successful in their careers and to be able to stay and thrive in Silicon Valley. My second priority is to have our K through 12 education funding reach the average across the country. We need to restore our funding to those levels that we had many decades ago. My last piece and my last priority has to do with truly smart growth and the environment. They truly do go hand in hand, and these are the things that I'm very passionate about, and I'll speak more to it later.
My name is Natasha Gupta. I'm a technology worker. I'm a resident of San Jose, and as one of the only candidates here who is someone that comes directly from the technology private sector, I have heard from so many doors that we have knocked that everyone is yearning for innovative solutions for us to resolve the most pressing crises that we faced in California right now. The cost of housing, the cost of education, the escalating daily living, and frankly, the very real challenges our children face in the face of the innovation economy. It is my priority when I get to the Assembly to bring that experience to the challenges that we face as a state and to make your voice first.
Hello, I'm Bob Brunton. I'm running for State Assembly. Let me tell you about this campaign. My campaign is about issues and solutions. I'm going to Sacramento to do two things. One is fix our state. Second is prepare our state. I'm going to be focusing on 4 key areas: improving education, improving mass transit, improving civil justice, and most importantly, improving our trust back in government. Now, I'll bring with me the experience I've had as a business owner, and as I have a manufacturing company and also a wealth management company, and as also a 12-year elected official. The one thing we are lacking in California is the lack of imagination. We live in Silicon Valley, yet our government acts like it's a dinosaur. I'm going to be bringing new ideas, fresh ideas. Vote for Bob Brunton, the old guy with the bright new ideas.
Hi, my name is Anna Song. I have been serving on the Santa Clara County Board of Education for 20 years. I currently serve as Vice President of the board. I have been fighting for the public education for the last 20 years, and we've seen the tsunami of the charter school movement. Some have been good, and some are not so good, but they claim to close the achievement gaps. And I think public education is in crisis. We need more funding. There's no doubt about it for California students. But also, we need better messaging. Our public education have been educating all kids. And the messaging is that somehow our public education is not superior as others. And we need to do a better job in messaging that and ensure our teachers are paid well. As a single mom, as everyone has stated, housing is tough, transportation is tough. I like to bring the voice of a struggling mom to Sacramento. Thank you, Anna Song.
Hello everyone, my name is Carmen Montano. I am representing District 25, and it covers the cities of Newark, Santa Clara, Milpitas, North San Jose, and Fremont, Southern Fremont. Today, more than ever, the political landscape requires people who feel a deep commitment to serve the public interest. People who want to shape policy to improve organizational and make life better for everyone. I have over 15 years experience as a public servant, and that is why I feel I can address critical issues that affect our region, primarily in housing, transportation, and education. As a child growing up, I recall that in the 60s, I was watching TV, and a famous president, John F. Kennedy, said these words: "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." These words have resonated with me to dedicate my life to community service.
Great. So Alex, can we start with you on the first question? This is going to be on homelessness, probably one of the number one issues in Silicon Valley, because the homelessness crisis in California is getting worse. And I'd like to know from you, how can the state compel cities to approve more low-income housing, and how should those who don't comply be punished?
Interesting question. Well, definitely, I think homelessness is a growing cause of concern in the Bay Area as well as the state. And delivering on affordable housing for low-income and extremely low-income residents in the Bay Area is one of my top priorities. So I approach housing in three kind of buckets. There's the market-driven solutions, which are the SB 50s of the world, which I support. There's also protecting and preserving affordable housing to make sure that our families are not driven out to the streets. And the third approach, which has been hampered in the state by a racist vestige in our Constitution, is Article 34, which I'll hopefully repeal, because what we need is to adopt real, meaningful social housing in this country and in the state as well. So what I think we need to do is, at the same time attacking the market-based solution, really give social housing and get public housing back on its feet so we can get more families housed and end this reign of commoditized housing, and that's really what's driving a lot of families out there onto the streets, And homelessness and housing crisis are definitely the top issues that I hear always at the door, and at this point we've knocked on more than 12,000 doors, and it's the number one priority I always hear.
When it comes to the homeless issue, a lot of innovative things are happening, the navigation centers, for example, but there has been pushback in certain communities. I think a piece of that is that in terms of the mental health issues, the navigation centers don't really address it properly. California, decades ago, and we are going back to the governorship of Ronald Reagan, there was a time when we actually had funding at the state level for dealing with those that have mental challenges and health concerns. Agnew's Center, where we're building 3 new schools in Santa Clara Unified, used to be such a place that the state funded. It no longer does. We need to restore that funding for that component. The navigation centers, for those who are capable of taking advantage and leveraging it to advance themselves, I support that. In terms of the market-driven aspects of housing, in all of this, we have to recognize that the only solution is we need to increase our housing production. And we will certainly get into that later as this goes.
So I think when we talk about the issue of affordable housing and the issue of homelessness, you cannot take out of the equation the fact that year after year, the taxpayers of our district have approved bonds, have approved measures to fund affordable housing. It is clearly a moral priority for everyone in our district. But what lacks in this particular solution is the emphasis on combining this with giving our homeless a path to re-enter society again through providing funding for mental health and providing adequate services for job retraining. One of the ways that we see in San Jose that we're tackling this issue head on and what could work for our state is being able to combine any housing program with significant programs for job retraining, such as what we're seeing with the Google development downtown. They are going to be working directly with nonprofits like Year Up to ensure that the homeless also have a path towards getting back into the job market and being able to be on a path towards thriving. And so any successful solution has to hinge on rehabilitating our homeless entirely.
Yeah, homelessness is bothering everybody. And it is part of the whole home ownership package. One of the ideas that I'll be promoting is sales tax reform. Now, this may sound awkward to you, but if in fact we took 2 cents of the current sales tax and give it to the cities where you live, as opposed to where you shop, it helps change the calculus of where we want to do housing. Because right now, Sacramento keeps trying to pound on them to build housing. A more appropriate approach would be, now if you get a new neighbor, some more money will come to your city. An example is a way to put for redevelopment agencies. We also need to be bringing back some of the things we talked about in the past as well, with the be willing to allow for, in Milpitas, they have a house sharing program where they're inviting people into their homes. And we need to bring back the state hospitals like we had in Agnew's. So there's a whole variety of things, but the major problem with homelessness is it's a government-state problem, and Bob Brunt's going to try to fix it one step at a time, but sales tax reform is the beginning point.
As many have said, homeless is one of the major problems in our district in Silicon Valley. And I see it as a trustee on the school board as well. Homelessness, as a tenant, as a renter, I'm one paycheck away from being a homeless. And I feel the pain, and in the Silicon Valley, it's a real problem. And For me, when the students are being tossed around within the district because their residents are in question, it really hurts as a mom and as an educator, and we need to solve that problem. And we need to make sure that income disparity is also addressed in our thriving Silicon Valley as well.
So first of all, there are 3 types of homeless. You have the mentally ill, you have the working poor, and then you have those that have substance abuse problems. We know we have a huge housing affordability problem here in this area. I would like to revive the Redevelopment Agency. Those of you that know about the Redevelopment Agency, it was developed by Congress back in the early 60s to address blighted areas. However, when cities had that in their pocket to use to develop areas, there was some abuse, so Governor Jerry Brown took that away. What I would like to do is bring that back, but just hone in on affordable housing. And that's what I would like to do to address the homeless issue. And it's all about bringing affordable housing to, the more you have in the housing stock, the lesser you have, the more people will be able to afford affordable housing, excuse me. It's all about the markets.
Great. Ann?
For decades, we have been increasing the number of jobs in this region, but we have not been increasing the number of housing units fast enough. We have got to change that dynamic. While we've increased the tech jobs, for every 8 jobs, there's been 1 housing unit that's been developed. So clearly we need to add housing, but it's more than just increasing the stock. And so we have to provide wraparound services for the people who need help for a variety of reasons, for mental health reasons, for addiction reasons. And there are so many that are so close to the edge that we need to provide services that can support them so that they don't lose their housing and help maintain their housing. It's going to be critical that we build dense housing so that we have more units here. Building in the Central Valley is going to be good for some people, but it's not going to solve the problem here in Silicon Valley. So we've got to be open. And so what can the state do? It can reduce regulations. It can promote housing in that way.
Great. So Jim, I'll start with you on this one. When it comes to the cost of living, Californians are fleeing the state at record rates. They're citing the cost of living, but also issues like traffic. So what is the #1 thing that you do to improve the lives of San Joseans?
What I believe we should do, and we've kind of touched on it already in terms of the housing situation, I think in the role of an assembly person, we need to streamline the ways of building. We may get to this later, but CEQA needs to be streamlined. It must be. It's not serving our needs in the early 21st century. So we need to see CEQA streamlined. I think also too, when anything is built in terms of housing, and this goes to the affordability issue that we face, developers have quite a lot to get through to build. They'll tell you how difficult it is to build in the Silicon Valley. And a part of that is developer fees. As a trustee on a school board, it's absolutely an issue that we deal with. When we build new schools, we have to get the fundamental developer fees to make that happen. And I think what Sacramento could do that would be innovative is if Sacramento could do more. I'm out of time.
I think if you look at the cost of living in California, look no further than our millennial population and what it takes for them to be able to just afford a home, what it takes for them to afford the cost of college, what it takes to basically start your adult life. And so what it will mean for us as an assembly body, for us to really resolve this issue, is we need to ensure home ownership is something that is within reach for our youngest Californians right now. As a millennial homeowner, let me tell you, foreign speculation and all of these other factors in buying and placing an offer on a home is a big issue for even just starting starting your adult life. When it comes to the cost of college, we need to comprehensively tackle the cost of living and the cost of tuition in a combined, comprehensive way to lower the cost of education so that our young adults can go into the world without having to sign up for a life of debt if they prepare themselves with the skills they need for our economy. That's what we're going to need to do as an assembly body.
It's amazing we have this problem. You know, this is a wonderful place to live. The weather's spectacular, the geography is spectacular, but our government is horrible. And reality here is that, and as a business owner, and the only business owner on this board here, and I've actually had to create jobs for people and payroll, to meet payroll, what we need to do, and that's what I'm going to be doing, is creating an atmosphere where our government respects us more, where we are treated better, that our rules become simpler. And that wrong camera. And I talked to the right camera. But the reality is that our state is out of control in many ways, and that's what Bob's going to be working on, reducing those regulations and reducing the terrible bureaucracies.
I think for me, the single most important thing is to ensure more affordable housing. And as it was said, we need to remove red tapes to be able to have local agencies to build more housing, affordable housings as well. And as a county board trustee, we've seen our excess property tax being skimmed off because our county is considered as one of the few counties in the state to be a rich county. And so a certain amount of formula is used, and our funding that was due to schools are being taken back to the state and being redistributed. The first thing I'm going to do to make sure that our district, our San Jose, is served is to make sure those property taxes are not being taken away from our county.
So first of all, you have to ask, well, why are they leaving the state? It's because their quality of life is being affected. You've got people jammed in traffic, they're stuck in traffic jams. You have a lack of affordable housing. You have an educational system that, for some reason, the classrooms are too crowded. So those three things, education, affordable housing, transportation, we need to really tackle those issues and get people's quality of life back on track. So what I would like to do is I would like to propose having more people take mass transit and have a tax deduction so people can use mass transit, and that way they won't be stuck in traffic as much. Also, affordable housing, as I mentioned before, I'd like to revive the Redevelopment Agency and just hone in on building homes for building that housing stock so people can have a home to live and to buy. So those are my issues that I'd like to, and also to bring back more funding into our transportation system.
So we've got just a few minutes left. And so I want to make the most of our time. And because we've only got about 5 minutes left before this is wrapped up, I want to do a lightning round. 30 seconds. You guys can do it. And the question.
Do I get to? We didn't answer the last question.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Let's finish
seconds?
that.
We'll do it quick.
Go ahead.
Which camera are we looking at? Right there? Okay, great. It is alarming how many people are either leaving or contemplating leaving this valley. When my mother raised my sister and I as a single mom, she could afford to work, have childcare for my sister and I, and we were afforded a wonderful education through the public school system. I went through public schools, kindergarten through law school. And we need to do better. We need to provide universal preschool for families. We need to obviously provide more affordable housing. We need to make our transit system work. We have 27 districts in this region. We need to do better at collaborating so that people can get from one place to another using public transportation. And so we need to provide wraparound services so families that are living on the edge have resources to allow them to thrive in our community and therefore will be willing to stay in our community.
Yeah, the issue of displacement is very real. Most people that I know are on the verge of moving out of the Bay Area entirely. I myself, if things don't really change, I have to settle up a life somewhere else entirely. And I think it's interesting that Google gets brought up because a year ago from today, Google was controversially approved by the San Jose City council, which was great fear and anxiety about displacement. We have to talk about really what economic success looks like in the Silicon Valley and who is that success actually for. Is it for the hardworking working class families of the Bay Area, or is it for corporations? So what we have to do to rebalance and make the Bay Area actually affordable for people is tax the corporations a lot more, make them pay their fair share, make common sense reform to Prop 13 to fund our schools, and also repeal Costa-Hawkins to protect our tenants and renters. And I promised to be short, so that was.
That's great. You know what, actually, we are out of time. I wish that we had more time, but this has been a really great panel, because we've heard about some of the most critical issues affecting Silicon Valley, including homelessness, and how you would improve everybody's everyday life. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up, but I want to thank you guys for coming, for sharing your thoughts about these really critical issues, and I want to thank our audience for tuning in.
You could use an hour.
Now let's welcome the candidates for Santa Clara County Supervisor in District 3. This seat, which covers North San Jose, Sunnyvale, and Milpitas, is being vacated by termed out Supervisor Dave Cortese. And the ground rules here are that you'll each get 1 minute to do an opening statement. After that, we'll jump straight into questions, and you'll each get 1 minute. Go ahead and look over here to Fernanda Jimenez. She'll be giving you a 30-second warning as well as a stop time. And when you see that stop sign, stop as quickly as possible so that we can move on to the next. Let's go ahead and start here with Magdalena. We'll start with you for your opening statement.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having us all here. It's I have to say, it's been one of my greatest honors to serve the city of San Jose as a council member, but I've also been a social worker way before I ever jumped into politics. I was doing social work, working with families in crisis for about 25 years. And so I feel that I'm the most equipped to tackle on a very, very complicated position, a very difficult seat in Santa Clara County. And we'll be facing a lot of very complicated issues still on the housing crisis, the environment, mental health, and of course public safety. These are issues that I've made it a point to be part of my priority during the last 5 years that I've served the city of San Jose, and it would be a great honor to be able to serve the entire county.
Thank you very much. Thank you to San Jose's Spotlight and Creativity TV for having us here. My name is Kenson Chu. I'm running for county supervisor because I want to bring my 20 years public services experience back home so it can be more impactful. I serve at county commission on mental health, and I was elected to various school board and served on the San Jose City Council for 8 years, and also served in the State Assembly for 6 years. And county services is really an extension of the state human services area. And I was very honored to be able to serve as the chair of the State Assembly Human Services Committee. So it is a great honor to be back home.
Hi, I'm Otto Lee. I'm a father of 3 girls, immigrant, intellectual property attorney, and a 28-year Navy veteran. I served 8 years on Sunnyvale City Council, including a term as the Green Mayor in one of America's 10 safest cities. I've served in Iraq to help bring our troops home and was awarded the Bronze Star. I've dedicated my life to serve the public to improve our community. Now I'm running for supervisor to solve these problems: rising homelessness, the ridiculous housing costs, traffic jams, and unsafe neighborhoods. We need affordable housing for our seniors, our teachers and students, and our at-risk families. I will fight to increase mental health services so people living on the streets can get what they desperately needed. And I will lead efforts to reduce traffic and air pollution, improve public transit, include Caltrains and VTA. This is not just another political job, and it's personal to me because these are serious challenges that will affect our kids' future. So by working together, we can fix them, and we will. Again, this is Otto Lee. I'm honored to be speaking with you today. Thank you.
Our county's biggest problems, homelessness, the mentally ill, drug abuse, are county responsibilities. I'm John Leba, and I'm running for County Supervisor because I want to apply my 20 years of community advocacy, from education to parks to land use planning, some time on the San Jose Planning Commission, as well as 15 years in finance and business operations to solve these problems. Our county government has gone from spending $4.9 billion a year to $8.1 billion a year in just the last 5 years. We have the resources to solve the problems that are in front of us. I look forward to tackling the challenges that our community has. So that's why I'm running for supervisor. Thank you.
Great. We're going to jump straight into the questions. And Kansan, I'm going to start with you for this one. This one is about RHNA goals. So cities across the Bay Area.
About what, I'm sorry?
RHNA, the state housing goals.
Oh, okay.
So cities across the Bay Area are bracing for the new state mandated housing goals, which are expected to be significantly higher than the goals that we have today. So what role, if any, can or should the county play in helping cities to meet their goals, or should cities be punished for not meeting those goals?
Yes, definitely. The RHNA goal has always been there. There's some city trying hard to really get that number. And last year in the state legislature, we do propose some carrot and the sticks, and we're suing 4 cities for not meeting the RHNA goal, and we're providing some funding to the cities that actually come close to meet the RHNA goal. It is a goal, I think, is more importantly that our county or region should have a long-term comprehensive plan to address this issue and how to achieve this goal.
Otto?
Yes, the state RHNA goals are something I believe is very important in order to make sure that the housing crisis will hopefully be tackled one day. As I said earlier, our housing prices is no longer high. It's just ridiculous. And the shortage of housing in the Bay Area especially has gone through the roof. And I really do believe that the county has a huge role to play, because after all, there are 15 cities in the Santa Clara County, of which we have certain cities that are not meeting the goals and not building the housings needed to do the job balance. And I really do believe that the county has a huge role to play, because it's not about only one type of housing. We need to build housing in transportation corridor, we need higher density in downtown area, but we also need housing for temporary housing needs that we need for so many people. There's too many people living on the streets, and there are people sleeping in the cars. Those sleeping in the cars and RVs, those are still homeless. They are still unhoused, and we need to meet those goals by solving all of them. Thank you.
If my understanding is correct, the RHNA stands for the Regional Housing Needs Allocation.
Right.
That's the one you're talking about? Okay. So basically the process there is the state is setting targets for all the cities, and some cities meet those benchmarks and some don't. If memory serves, 2 of our cities in District 3, Sunnyvale and Milpitas, are actually meeting or close to meeting their RHNA goals. That's in sharp contrast to most of the cities across the West Valley in Santa Clara County. Our county itself is actually one of the largest landowners in the county. So I'd like to see the county make available parcels of land. And as you know, land is a key component in the total cost stack for any development. The county could make some of its surplus parcels of land available in those cities that are failing to meet their goals, and that would reduce the cost of housing. We could do more affordable housing in the West Valley cities. Most of Measure A dollars, well over half, is going to San Jose. Other cities need to build affordable housing too.
Thank you. Well, the RHNA goals, of course, set off lofty goals for each city across the state. And let me just say this. The housing crisis is one of the biggest crises that we've seen in our lifetime. And it didn't start just yesterday. It started decades ago. Unfortunately, now is when we're seeing the real impact of having underbuilt, produced many jobs in Silicon Valley, but underbuilt housing units. And so now we find ourselves in a predicament that is costing people their lives. The county, it's been said here, is one of the biggest landowners, and we have an ability with Measure A and any other tax measure that's going to come to support housing, to be able to produce more housing. We have to be able to deal with the crisis at all levels. It's not just those who are living on the streets or living in RVs, but it's social workers, it's teachers, it's individuals who are having to flee the area because it's one of the most expensive areas in the nation.
Great. So for this one, Otto, I'll start with you. And this is regarding mental health, because these services fall under the county's, a lot of these services fall under the county's purview, but some city officials say resources seem to be significantly lacking to address the need. And so do you support Laura's Law, which would compel certain individuals to get treatment? And what else should the county do to address the shortage in resources?
Yes, Laura's Law is a measure that actually has been adopted by many, even of our neighboring counties, including San Francisco, Alameda, and San Mateo counties, which is a way to help provide outpatient mental health services to those who really need it. Right now, the services are based on a voluntary basis, and there are those individuals who, honestly, they really need more help, and voluntary is not working. And that's what we're seeing a lot of the homelessness cycle that we see, homelessness to public safety, to jail, and then they get released again. I really do think that Laura's Law is something that Santa Clara County should seriously consider adopting, because we really need to actively provide these type of mental health services. If we recall, back in the 70s when Governor Reagan took out funding to our mental health institutions, folks are being up in the street, and county suddenly has this responsibility. And that problem is just exacerbated with the housing crisis we have. So I really do think that this is something that we should seriously consider, like our neighboring counties, to provide the real help to our folks on the streets. Thank you.
Last month, the county supervisors did a referral to staff to bring back a proposal on Laura's Law. My understanding is it's coming up on a county supervisor agenda next week or the following. The supervisors need to implement Laura's Law in Santa Clara County, period, full stop. The counties like San Francisco and Los Angeles that implemented it with the assisted outpatient therapy that Laura's Law provides for those patients, and it's not all of them, but for the ones that could utilize those services, saw like an 80% reduction in the total cost of providing care to those folks. The county spends, or is planning to spend, like $557 million for its behavioral health, behavioral services department in the coming budget cycle. I'm not sure if that's the right amount of money. I would like to see us really focus resources on mental health care, improving crisis care, making sure that people can get the help they need when they need it. But I'd like to see a top-down performance review all through that department to really measure effectiveness and make sure we're getting top value there.
Great.
Thank you. As a representative that has a team that works very closely with our houseless population, I'll tell you that I understand the frustration that neighbors and residents are starting to experience because of what they perceive as an encroachment into their neighborhood. You have blight, you have litter, and our homeless or our houseless population is in a very, very difficult situation. They have nowhere to go. So let's start off by saying that. Secondly, many of them either suffer from mental health issues and or drug addiction or alcohol addiction. Laura's Law, I think, came out of this frustrated conversation, but we have 5150 and we have a conservatorship. And we need to be able to figure out whether or not we're exploring and utilizing that to the best of our ability. If you take folks in, where are you putting them? We don't have enough beds. We don't have enough inpatient services. So I would start first with creating a pipeline to make sure that we have the clinicians and the resources available before really looking at implementing Laura's Law.
Yeah, I support Laura's Law because it only affects a small percentage of the mental health consumers. It only affects those who was previously incarcerated or hospitalized. So the challenge for the county is to be able to provide services, like Councilmember Carrasco mentioned, do we have enough bed? Do we have the services when they force the treatment? So that's a challenge. We need to make sure that we have adequate funding to implement Laura's Law.
Great. John, I'd like to start with you on this one. And voters in 2016 overwhelmingly said yes to Measure A, which is a $950 million affordable housing bond aimed at building or preserving 4,800 homes in the region. As of June 30th, about $271 million of the bond has been committed. So I'm wondering, how would you make the most of the remaining funding? And would you support another bond measure or tax for affordable housing in the meantime?
Yeah, it's a great question. So of Measure A, about 700 of the $950 million are going to permanent supportive housing, about 4,800 units. And at this point, they're about halfway through the unit production on that. The county's actually doing a very nice job. I think there's some metrics and some info sheets that are available online. The supervisors have shared those out that show that they are delivering on units, and they're on track right now. I want to see the county stay on track. My big concern is that a lot of the units are in San Jose. I don't believe we're spreading them all throughout the county to make sure that the entire county sort of shares the burden. And that people have opportunities to live in every community in the county. I would not support an additional tax measure for affordable housing until we spend through the Measure A dollars. There's several $100 million on the table that are not committed. Let's finish that job first before we take on another commitment.
Great. Magdalena.
Thank you. That money is going to be spent very quickly, and we will not have made a dent in providing housing for those who are the most vulnerable and at most risk. So I'll say I supported Measure A, and if there was another measure that we could hold folks or jurisdictions accountable for, I would support it as well, because we know that we can build in the next 10 years and we're still going to have a huge need for housing. Again, addressing the middle income, the folks who are now having to flee the area, we need to make sure that they stay here and provide the services and products that we've come to depend on, that a healthy economy depends on. But we also have to make sure that those who are suffering from domestic violence, foster care, sexual assault, human trafficking are going to have somewhere where they can go and escape their perpetrators.
I like to see a comprehensive plan to address the homelessness issue, because there are so many different reasons for people to become homelessness. We were talking about production, we're talking about prevention, we're talking about preservation. So we need to have maybe a computer model and find out how much money that we should be spending on production, how much money we should be spending on prevention, and how much money we should be spending on preservation. You know, when I was on the San Jose City Council, I have a North San Jose neighborhood plan, which I got all the stakeholders, the developer, the residents, the labor, the bicycle coalition people, and we come up with a plan, and that it becomes part of the 2030 San Jose General Plan, which calls for 28,000 units of housing, and so we need to have a comprehensive plan before we keep throwing money at this problem.
Great. Ado?
Yes, the $950 million, I believe, will be all spent. And the issue I see with affordable housing these days is the time it takes to build them is far too long. The pipeline at this point sometimes is 2 to 4 years. And you know, as I tell people, building housing is not rocket science. We could do it a lot quicker. I think we need to take away a lot of the red tapes. One of the issues I also want to see is the prevention of people getting homelessness. Because once people become homeless, it's so much harder to get out of the problems. And I think this is why we need to make sure that the type of funding we're using is also working on people to make sure that they are going to be able to make that maybe 1 month of rent, so that they keep them housed before they have to move, especially for families. Another area I would talk about is I used to live in Iraq for a year in a 40-foot container as a military housing. And these are some of the urgent measures that could be implemented probably quickly, whether it's tiny homes, whether it's container housing, that we need to look into getting people away from the tents on the underpass and Creekside. to actual hard shell housing. Thank you.
Magdalena, I'll send this one to you. So 8 of the world's 10 largest tech companies are either headquartered or have major offices in Santa Clara County, and many residents blame them for an increase in traffic and housing costs. So I'm curious, how can the county ensure that tech companies are doing their part to address the impacts of their growth?
And I can understand that. Again, Silicon Valley had a boom which produced over 700,000 jobs. And we only built a little bit over 100,000 units during that same period of time. So we have mega commuters who are coming in from Central Valley, who are coming in from the Bay Area into Silicon Valley. And this is one of the reasons why we're sitting in freeways. It's a parking lot. And so I understand the frustration. Again, the housing crisis didn't start overnight. It didn't happen just yesterday. It's been going on for the last 20 years, and it's been building up, and just now we're starting to really see the impacts, especially in big cities like San Jose, where we see a lot of our houseless population, but a lot of the folks who are being displaced, and entire communities, such as my district, that are being completely gentrified. And so it's easy to blame the bad big wolf, and I do think that they have some role in this, but I think the role that they have is in helping us build more, contributing to those who are building, and making sure that they are hiring from within the community.
You know, I was talking about the North San Jose Neighborhood Plan, 28,000 residential unit, and also 32 million square feet of commercial industrial building. Because in the 60s, the leadership in San Jose encouraged more of the residential housing. So when I was on the San Jose City Council, we are experiencing some worse economic downturn, because we used to rely on the property tax. Now, because we pushed a lot of companies north to San Jose, so we're more and more rely on the sales tax. So I think having those big companies coming down to San Jose will definitely help the local tax base, but there is some gentrification problems that we need to be addressed. I think they should definitely be a good corporate citizen to contribute money to the housing issue, and also addressing some traffic impact issue.
Yeah, we know that Google has pledged $1 billion, and Apple has then followed suit with $2 billion. These are exciting news headlines, but what we need to make sure is that they really put the money where the mouth is. I do believe our county government and city governments need to partner with them. When it's really a matter of planning. Having served 5 years in Planning Commission, we know these things are coming. We know the jobs are coming from Google. What are we going to do, right? I have nothing wrong about building nicer housing in our towns. The problem is the dislocation of our neighborhoods. People have been living there, are being dislocated because they can no longer afford. That's a real problem. And I think it's important to make sure that when you increase these jobs here, we welcome these good paying jobs, but we cannot hurt our local residents in that type of efforts. And I really do believe that it's not just a city by city problem, it really is a regional problem. And I think that's where the county has such an important role to play. And the supervisors really work very close together, like they did with Stanford, to make sure they do the right things. And this is what we need to work hard on.
Okay. Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, definitely. So basically, this is at a time when many residents blame big tech in Santa Clara County for an increase in traffic and housing costs. How does the county ensure that tech companies are coming to the table and doing their part to address the impacts of their growth?
Sure. Okay. So the first thing I think we all need to recognize is that planning and land use by state law is primarily a city function. So the county can serve in sort of a thought leadership role, and just as the discussion of the RENA goals earlier, really push on the cities to maybe make some land available or other incentives to do more housing development in those cities, and foster private-public partnerships with the companies as far as if they want to, commit dollars, or even just make sure that if they want to do mixed-use facilities, that there's a template for that. So I think the county can kind of provide some thought leadership there, but it's ultimately up to all the cities to allow them to provide housing, allow them to build the residential side along with their growth. I mean, there's two cities in our county, Santa Clara and Palo Alto, have a disproportionate job space to residential, and so we really need cities like that to turn that around.
Great. So I think that we'll move on to our last question of the night, and this one is around transportation. So transportation officials, and I'm sorry, we'll start with you, Kim. So transportation officials last month announced another delay with opening the BART stations in Berryessa and Milpitas. Meanwhile, ridership with the VTA is down. So if you were appointed to the VTA board, let's say as a supervisor, how would you balance the needs of both agencies to ensure bus services are preserved while paving the way for BART?
Thank you. Yeah, the delay of the two stations impact my community significantly. I represent Berryessa and Milpitas. Yeah, we're very disappointed with the delay. I think there's a recent grand jury report on the BTA, so I would definitely make sure that the BTA board will follow this grand jury recommendation and make regain some credibility of that organization. And also on the bus services, I think we should definitely have a more extensive outreach to the communities and let the community weigh in on which bus route and how the bus should go around the city. And I will also suggest that the BTA use some smaller, cleaner bus, so instead of the big 50-footer to go around the city.
Otto?
To me, the delay of the BART problem here is basically unconscionable. They said this is a software problem. We're in the heart of the Silicon Valley, and we can't fix some software problem. I think it's more of a contract management issue, and if there were penalty clauses put into the contract, I think these things will be done quicker. But right now, I don't think that's being enforced. VTA ridership is getting worse, and they're talking about cutting VTA lines. And to me, I think that's unconscionable as well, because the cost of ridership, I think, is too high. $225 for ride, round trip $450. If it takes so long to get to a VTA bus and ride in, you see, except for commute times, right? Sometimes there are only 4 people in the train or on the 22 double bus. We really need to focus on filling the buses and our trains. That's what we need, not filling the fare box recovery. Until we can get that working, our public transportation system is going down. So,
I'll tell you what I would not do. Earlier this year, VTA voted to cut certain lines like the 65 that was kind of a critical line going by an affordable senior complex that's in the process of being built. Now those seniors won't have a good way to get to the doctor. The VTA board voted to spend $450 million to extend light rail to Eastridge, which will result in 2,000 people taking light rail a couple miles, when the buses right now are doing it more cost effectively on a dollar per rider basis. I would like to see us focus on the buses, which are the real backbone of the system, and potentially reduce light rail service and switch back to the buses that worked and got people around. We could very easily give buses priority at signals like the BRT line has done with the 522 running down Alum Rock. I've ridden the bus before. I used to ride it from Alum Rock to Palo Alto a few years back, and so I think that's really the way we need to focus on our dollars.
Thank you. Yes. So I sit on the VTA board, and let me just say the following: a couple of things. California was not built for mass transportation, and so we're having to go back and change the culture of individuals who refuse to get out of their cars. That's one. This is not like Paris, where the buses are running, or the trains or the buses are running every 2 to 6 minutes. I was there several years ago, and I was amazed at the efficiency. It's easier, faster to get on a train, even if you have your entire family with you, than to even think about driving a car. And that's going to have to be the change in mentality and culture that has to happen first before we start filling all of the buses and trains. And that's going to take time. But we need to build it so that we can have people use it and have alternate modes of transportation. Because one of the most frustrating things is, again, to sit in a parking lot, and which was meant to get us from one place to the other.
Yeah, great. That's all the time that we have today. Thank you all for coming. Oh, I'm sorry.
I just have a rebuttal regarding to the light rail to Eastridge.
Oh,
do I have time?
Unfortunately, we are completely out of time. I'm so sorry for that. But I want to thank you all for coming, and I want to thank everybody for viewing in. And we're looking forward to this upcoming election.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.